I was going to tell you a little story. I think we met Ted maybe 3 years ago or so, before the museum was even built. And he happened to call us and said, hey, if you ever need any help with some cars and that, let me know. And so in the very beginning, we're going to do the American racing theme down the Great Hall. And when I was talking to Ted, he was saying, oh yeah, maybe you can get, a winged car or something. And I said, well, do you happen to know anybody that has a winged car? And he goes, oh yeah, I know Tim. Tim just happens to have, Bobby Isaac's, a K&K car. I said, oh wow, yeah, that'd be great. So I called Tim, and he was so kind. He said, yeah. He goes, what would look really nice next to that K&K car? Richard Petty's 43 wing car. And I go, yeah, that will look really nice next to it. And sure enough, he gave me Todd Warner's contact, and Todd was nice enough to loan us that car. So again, I want to thank these guys for everything they've done for the museum, and also thanks, for doing this lecture. And I will now turn this over to those guys. So thanks very much.
Welcome to the Savoy. In the event that you don't know where the name for this beautiful museum came from, it's rusting out here on the side lawn. A 1954 Plymouth Savoy. The old girl was found in the woods here as the property was being cleaned for these magnificent buildings. Title seemed fitting. What a legacy for a forgotten old car. Tonight we gather to celebrate its muscle car descendants and their worthy adversaries. To begin, Tim and I have been friends since our 20s. We've always been car guys, primarily Mopar, but we know Ford and GM built some great combatants for the supercar wars of the 60s and 70s, and we are proud to own some of them as well. Unlike most of our childhood friends, the posters and pictures on our bedroom walls are not pro ball players, but race cars. Mm-hmm. Our heroes were the drivers that fought it out on the racetracks of America, as the manufacturers knew what wins on Sunday sells on Monday. Ronnie Sox and Richard Petty were favorites, and later in life, with the honor of meeting these racing greats. But if it weren't for the grumpy Jenkins and Cale Yarboroughs in the opposite pits, who would have driven their competitive spirits? And it's competition that keeps you on your feet and your toes. Then there were the car chases blazing across the big screens, adding fuel to the fire. Bullet, Vanishing Point, Smokey and the Bandit, and many others that made the cars the stars. We watched them all over and over. Tim and his brothers followed their father, Doug Wellborn, into the family cabinet business, and he'll tell you about that in a minute. I originally hailed from Memphis, Tennessee, and the Saturday night cruises on Summer Avenue, commonly referred to as the Summer Nationals, and all those Sunday afternoons at Lakeland Dragway made me a diehard Mopar fan. At 17, my first car was a like-new 68 Dodge Super Bee. After my education, I began my career in the auto parts industry. A job in a Memphis warehouse led to parts store ownership in North Alabama. Stevens Performance in its infancy was me after working weekends scouring the car shows, swap meets, and salvage yards for parts for my budding car collection. And I was corrected early on about salvage yard terminology by a surly salvage yard operator. It's not junkyard, it's salvage yard. We don't say the J word. In the early 80s, I bought a 68 Charger parts car for the red Hemi car across the hall. Later, I ran an ad in the National Hemi Owners newsletter for what it had that I didn't need. The phone literally rang off the wall, but not just for pieces of the Charger. There were requests for parts for other Mopars as well. And since I knew where every dead Mopar and every salvage yard within 300 miles and every part that they had left on them, I began taking orders. The back room of my Sheffield, Alabama CarQuest store was converted into a warehouse and shipping hub, and Stevens Performance was born. I began to accumulate more parts cars. The company went full time. There were countless hours and miles logged locating them and bringing them in. And today we're the largest Mopar-only salvage operation in the world. We have between 2,000 and 3,000 60s and 70s Mopar salvage cars in inventory, and I've loved every minute of it. We've never crushed the first one, and we still have that first Charger I chopped up in the driveway. Maybe someday we'll restore it and bring it full circle. We also sell new parts. In the 80s, or the 00s rather, we expanded into manufacturing reproductions. We are licensed with Chrysler Corporation, and one of the most satisfying accomplishments that I have experienced has been making things they discontinued long ago and then resupplying Mopar itself with their customers' vintage parts needs. We've had a lot of fun supplying parts and support to the entertainment industry with cars you see in movies and TVs today. Hollywood loves vintage muscle cars, and I know it's because of their looks. Some of the lines penned by the automotive stylists of the 60s and 70s are absolutely timeless. But paramount is the joy of helping others achieve their own automotive dreams through the cars, parts, and services we provide, and we deeply appreciate their business. A man much wiser than I will ever be once told me, if you can make a living doing something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That man was my father, Herschel Stevens, Jr., and as always, he was right. I know Mr. Doug had many words of wisdom for Tim as well. The Wellborn Musclecar and Stevens Performance collections are the fruits of our labors. We have spent years chasing premium examples of Detroit Boulevard bruisers that have captivated Tim and myself since they were on the dealer showroom floors. As collectors, the thrill of the hunt is what drives us, but the roar that follows the turn of the key of the latest acquisition brings the same rush as the first one. We welcome this opportunity to share some of our toys with you. Tim?
Okay. Well, I'll have to say I've known Ted too many years. We're not going to tell you how many, so if you figure out how we're. But had it not have been for him and a couple others like you, we would not be able to have these muscle cars we have in the condition we have in, because somebody had the foresight, like Ted here, to go looking for those parts and figure out a way to get them reproduced so that we could have these things sitting here. So I'm glad to be here. It's great to see this great museum. And wow, I got the personal tour today from Bruce on all three museums since we got here. Wow, it's something else. So how did this journey start? Well, for me, being in the kitchen cabinet business, we sold a lot of kitchen cabinets through the years. I used to come to Atlanta all the time, sell these apartments over here, a company called Post Property. Some of you old ones might know who they are, and just thousands of kitchens. Well, every time I had a little extra money, I didn't believe in the stock market. I'd find me another one of these things to buy. And so it grew and grew and grew, and we would be able to buy one, find one a little better, sell that one, move into the next one up, and just kept elevating all the way to the top of the, I guess you could say, the car chain or food chain if you want to. So where did it all start? It started with my dad. It wasn't just being in the cabinet business. My dad was my best friend. He was my mentor, and he had the foresight to buy a 71 Hemi Charger. We still have that car to this day, and I remember sitting in it as a kid, and I was about maybe 10 years old, and dreaming about when I got 16, I was going to get the keys to that 71 Hemi Charger. I assure you, I could have broke into Fort Knox and got all the gold they had before I found the key to that 71 Hemi Charger. So, and that's why I'm standing here talking to you today, and that's why the car is still in our possession. Had just a tremendous amount of fun through the years. Long journey, and I'm going to share one story with you that started right here in Rockmart. Came to Rockmart, Georgia. There was a guy, some of you may know of him. His name was legendary in the area. His name was Mac Moats. Mac Moats built a lot of Mopar engines for cars and for dirt trackers up in the area, and he had a Superbird, a yellow Superbird with 6,000 miles on it. And I'd been hearing about this car for years, and I'm thinking, it can't be real. I know, Ted, you've been on these car in the barn journeys, and you get there and it might be a car, but it is nothing like it's been told to be. Well, finally, actually a kitchen cabinet installer was doing some work for me in Atlanta. He somehow saw the car, and he comes to me and says, Tim, the car is real. Well, next day I'm in the wind to Rockmart, Georgia to find this gentleman. And it's a good thing I drove up in a Dodge truck, because if you drove up in a Chevrolet truck, he would not even talk to you. And that's just how dyed-in-the-wool this old gentleman was. And so went in, looked at it. Sure enough, 6,000 miles. It's sitting in a barn, and it's been there all these years. He got caught racing it on a Saturday night, some racetrack around here, and his insurance company saw him and canceled his insurance. Well, the old guy was just contrary enough, said, I'll just park it and never drive it again, and he didn't. And so I said, all right, you want to sell it? And he said, yep. And you got to listen to this number. I said, I want $10,000 for it. And you could tell by the way he said it, don't ask him for $9,500 or you'll be on the road right then. And so I said, well, yes, sir, let's see if we can get it cranked. And so he went and got a battery. We got out there to the building, put the battery in it, put some fresh gas in it, turned the starter over. It had been started in so many years. For you car guys, you know, it went ping, 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 bent 6 push rods right off the bat. Valves were stuck on it. He said, well, son, help me roll it over there to my shop. And he had all these Mopar parts on, had to set up new push rods and all, and he started working on it, and he said, you come back in the morning with that money in cash. I said, yes, sir, I'll be here. He had that car running, and that car has never quit running to this day. It still runs perfect. So the journey was just beginning with that car. So Pam over here, my wife, and I'm one of the lucky guys that my wife is totally part of it, like Ted is with Jackie. She loves the car, she's part of it, and she wants to see these things and helps buy them, she knows everything about them. I'll give you a little story about her in a little bit. But so we get invited. The car collection has been growing a little bit, and we get invited to New York City, Rockefeller Center, 50 cars from all over the world. Now, how we got invited to that, I don't know, but here we are, the only Mopar. Let me explain what Mopar is. Mopar stands for motor parts, and it just became the nickname for Dodge and Plymouth muscle cars. That's why we call them Mopars. But you should call this a 71 Hemi Cuda all the time, but we look at it as a Mopar. And so we get invited to the Rockefeller Center, one of 50. I'm walking down the street, Pam and I are, and you ever heard of Bob Lutz, the CEO of Chrysler Corporation in the day? Well, he's walking right beside me. And I'm like, oh gosh, should I speak to him or not? You just don't know. And he spoke to me first. I was wearing a Breitling watch that day, and he had on one just like it. And he says, man, you got wearing a Breitling? I said, this guy actually spoke to me. That's hard to believe. And so we walk on down to the show. He had a car in the show as well, and get to chit-chatting some more. And he says, Tim, you want to go to lunch with me? I said, did I just get invited with the CEO of Chrysler Corporation to go one-on-one to lunch? And so he took me to lunch. So we got to talking more and more about cars. And I told him, in fact, I need to go find that slide. We might have to go through it so you'll know what car I'm talking about. I asked him to put it in here today, so we're going to go through them and come back. Oops, I went past it just then. That one, and that was here. Some of you, I guess, saw it here a couple of months ago. And he says, you know, Daimler and Chrysler supposedly was a merger of equals. He didn't like that deal. Now, I know some of y'all got some Porsches, and my wife drives one too, but he didn't like Germans. And they were interfering with Chrysler the way he looked at it. So he said, I told him, I said, I own the K&K Dodge. He says, you do? And I said, yeah. And he said, boy, I'd like to send that thing to Europe and just show all of them over there. We went fast before they did. And I'm like, I'm all in, but the motor is, it's a display motor in it. It won't work. Well, at that time, Chrysler was doing this new crate engine package with 426 Hemi, a 478 Hemi, and a 528 Hemi. And he says, we just completed all the testing on the 528 Hemi. I'll send you that engine down if you'll put it in that car. And I said, yes, sir, it'll be in it as soon as it gets here. And that proceeded to take us to, he got us loaded up. We would go to Atlanta, take the car over there, put it in a Lufthansa 747 in a crate, ship it to Europe. Nürburgring, Germany, 2 or 3 times. Y'all ever heard of Goodwood Festival Speed? I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that. Went there, I think 7 times. And Silverstone, England, just over that. That's the most traveled car in the history of NASCAR right there. And so that's how Pam and I had never been even to Europe at all. And here you are, first class tickets. You arrive there, you got a pit crew, you got a big Mercedes picking you up, driving you over to the track. It was really a fun time in our lives, and you just never know who you're going to meet in the car world. And since then, we've met, Ray Evernham, good friends. It goes on, Dave Marty, all these guys. You just meet. Car guys are car guys. It doesn't matter if you're a Ferrari guy or a General Motors guy or a Dodge guy or anything. It's just we all have one thing in common: we like cars. And so we got to do that, and that's how. And even that helped us in the cabinet business, because when Pam was over there, she got to look at all these old world finishes on those kitchens in their homes and the styling and everything. And so we came back and started duplicating those, and we were the first ones to do it over here. And we were the #1 cabinet company in the country for a while there with those things. And so that allowed us to make a little more money. And so cars have been special to us. So now I got to tell you a little bit about a fun one there with Pam and I. When I always had cars, and she and I didn't really know each other, but she was a majorette at Lineville High School. And I saw her twirling that fire thing round and around. That was the prettiest little girl I'd ever seen, I thought. And so I got word out I wanted to meet her. And now, I'm almost 7 years older than her now. She's a senior in high school. So back then, that's a pretty good spread in years. So she hears it, and I'm at the cabinet company one day. And y'all probably remember when you used to go sell ads in your annual to support your yearbook for your senior class and all. So she somehow swapped with a friend to come sell it to me. So she comes walking in. I'm like, reception says, "There's a Pam Twilly out here to meet you." I'm like, "What?" And so she came in, a little sundress on, cute, little smile, and she could have sold me anything that day. I tell you what. So I said, "Well, we had to call it," and that was for cell phones. You had to call on a regular landline, and we got to chit-chatting and said, "Well, I'd like to take you out, but I'm going to come visit your dad first, like a Southern gentleman's supposed to do, because I'm a little older than you, and with his permission, we will go out." Well, he knew of me. I guess he knew I wasn't too bad a guy, so he let us go, and we started dating some. And I remember I drove up in a 1970 Dodge Charger RT, 4-speed Hemi. And I'm real proud of my car. They only made 54 of those things. And so she comes out, we get in the car, and it's one of them nice, warm August nights. And she says, "Can you turn on the air conditioner?" I said, "No, there is no air conditioner." "What do you mean there's no air conditioner?" I said, "This is an all-out NASCAR race car engine. They don't put air conditioning on them, whether your makeup starts melting off her face, and I figure I'm never going to get another date with this girl in the rest of my life." But then we started dating more and more, and I said, if we're going to have a future together, we're going to have to. I got to know you really are a car girl. So I pulled out a bunch of books on Mopars, and I gave them to her. I said, "I want you to just kind of scan through these, and if you like what you're reading, and I can give you a little test, and I can tell if you're real about this." She did just that. She passed the test, and we're married 35 years. So, oh man, that's a little car story. But cars have been part of our lives. She's been very instrumental as well in helping pick and choose and continue up the ladder of getting these cars. Today, I think Ted and I were talking. Ted owns a little over 40 cars. I own a little over 60. And what we typically go for today is survivor cars. This one here is not a survivor. It's been painted one time. Me and my brother's done it way back in the 80s, and it still looks this good. I mean, from 5 feet away. Now you can kind of get a little closer and see some of our flaws, but it's too good to restore. Plus, we did it, and that makes it important to me that me and my brothers painted this car. So this car is a Georgia car. Came from Jonesboro, Georgia. And I remember hearing about this thing, reading about it. A guy brought me. This was before the internet days, so you did a lot of going to shows, listening out to try to find out how do where's one of these cars at or whatever, and you get any kind of hint, you go charging to try to find it. Well, this thing popped up in what's called a nickel trader, just a little thing. Y'all probably heard of them before, and it just said 71 Barracuda 426. And I'm like, that can't be true. It was. So I called that phone number up because one is, the first word he said was barracuda. Well, a real hemicuda is the word hemi. You lose the word barra when you go to the high performance motor. Then it's called a cuda, not a barracuda. So we drive over there to Jonesboro, my dad, and my brother and I, and way back in the woods. I mean, gravel roads. We weren't too sure where we was winding up at. And we drive up to this house, and it's got all these flags flying, stars and bars. I mean, you knew you was in Georgia, that's for sure, way back in there. And so the little guy comes out, and sure enough, we go out and take a look at it, and it had dust about an inch deep on top of it. It hadn't been started in years, and the car was so nice. Today, you would have kept it a Survivor. But back then, the paint had faded a little bit. You'd have buffed that out today and left it alone just to say it is a Survivor. So he wanted $10,000 for it. At the end of the day, we offered him $7,800, and we went home with a 71 Hemi-Cuda. And I don't know if y'all know what these things are worth now, because these are the most sought-after muscle car on the face of the planet, is a 71 Hemi-Cuda. They just recently, a 71 Hemi-Cuda convertible, how many of them, like 13, 14, something like that?
I think there was 9 of them.
Maybe it was 9 71s with a convertible in 71. No sold at Mecum for $4.5 million. So that tells you. So then when you get to the hard tops, they're easily $1 million and up. And so because even if you're a Ford collector, Chevy collector, classic car collector, if there's one Mopar you want, it's this one. Trouble is, they only made 108 of them. And that's why they're so sought after. So one of these things that ever turns over, it goes for really big money. And but the Survivor thing that I was telling you about, Ted and I basically reached a point in our collecting career that the shine doesn't mean anything to us. If you can find a Survivor, that's what we buy. Because a car that's never been touched is worth a lot more than a car that's been restored or painted. And now, I classify 3 kinds of Survivors. There's your Survivor that you get it and you say it's rust-free, paint's faded, but you walk around it and it's dented and got a little scratch, been to Walmart too many times or whatever, and so you know you're going to paint and restore that one, but you got good bones. You know, you're not fighting with a rusty car. And then you got the next one that's what I call a good Survivor, and those are the ones that you don't do anything except clean them up, but yet they still got a little ding here or scratch there, but you just leave it alone. Because I think Ted will tell you it's best to leave them alone even with some of that, because that's what people want. And then you got the great Survivors. That's the one that you sit and look at it and say, how did it survive 52 years and look like it came off the showroom floor yesterday? We've been lucky to find some of those lately. What's happening is the people now that bought them new and babied them all their life, they're at that age, and they're going to have to do something with the car. Gosh, in the last 2 years, I bought 3 Chargers that are just mint condition in every way from the original owners, and just because they've got to find a home for them. Unfortunately, a lot of times the kids don't want them. They'd rather have that check, whatever passes on, and so that's how you find them. One example, up here in Charlotte, North Carolina, I bought a 1970 Charger 2 years ago. I called this gentleman for 33 years in a row at Christmas time trying to buy that car. It's a solid white with blue interior, 426 Hemi 4-speed, like Pam and I used to date in, just a different color, and they only made 54 of them. Well, after 33 years, about 6 or 7 years ago, he came down to the museum. He was passing through from Charlotte to Montgomery for something. He wanted to finally meet me. He comes in, he says, wow, this is what I thought it might be, and I would really like to see my car in here. And I'm thinking, oh, finally, I'm going to get to buy this thing. No, his same old words. He said every year, no, son, it's not for sale. But when he walked away, he said, when I die, my daughter will call you. And that's exactly what happened 2 years ago. And it tells his story there in the museum about how, he took care of the car. It's just a brand new 1970 Hemi Charger. It's probably the best one in existence left of a 70 Hemi Charger, because that's how he babied it. So persistence plays a lot. There's been a lot of other cars that I know he and I have been after. Sometimes we get after them against each other. And so,
That white Charger was one of them.
yeah, he wanted that one too. I said, I'm gonna get there first, Ted. You know, so, but I could go on and on with a lot of stories like that because it's been good. So I'll start this and then we'll talk about some more cars. So cars also led us into Dana Meekum. Any of you watch Meekum auctions out there? Yeah. So back in 2014, Dana really starts coming to visit with us and try to get us to sell some cars. So let me tell you my Dana Meekum story. So Pam and I back, gosh, Pam, when was it? The first one we went to, and we brought that black LS6 that's sitting out there.
That would have been maybe 2007 or 8.
Yeah, that's about right. At Kissimmee then, you know, now it's massive with 4,000 cars going through it, but that particular event, we finally went, it's the first time we'd ever went to one, and he had a tent, one tent, with high school bleachers sitting there, with people sitting there, you know, and it was one of them cold nights too. It was chilly, and and their cars are coming by, and this black LS6, and I'm a Mopar guy, okay, but it's a survivor. So any of you that goes in there and looks at that black LS6, that is the way you like to find them, shining, still beautiful. And I got to look at that thing. I said, you know, I'd like to have this car. Now I didn't really know Dana Meekum other than just knowing he was the auction owner and all that. So the car's about to go up on the block. This tells you the kind of guy Dana Meekum is. I'll not say that about some other people in Scottsdale out there, but so car comes up. I'm wearing a sport coat like I am right now. I walk up with the car and I say, Dana, you don't know me, but I want to bid on that car. And I'm not signed in. And he says, yeah, I know you are. He says, I know your collection. I know everything about you. And I'm like, whoa. And he said, he said, you bid on that car. You win it, no problem. Well, I did at $110,000. And so I go up front to his office trying to pay for it. Well, they're at a loss. They have no clue who I am or what I bought or anything else because I didn't sign up with any credit before it. So I go back out there. Pam and I have our King Air at the airport, and we have to get to Destin, Florida from Orlando to a wedding that night. And I said, we're running out of time. I got to do something. Dana, how do I fix this? He looked over at Frank. Frank, come here. Frank, go up here and get that paperwork for this car. Bring it here. And so now he's still running across the auction block cars while all this is going on. And I'm standing up there just waiting for the paperwork. Paperwork comes back. Dana takes it, puts it in my hand. He says, you write me a check Monday morning, send it to me. That's the kind of guy Dana Meekum is. And that's how we started developing our relationship. So then around 2014, he kept coming and wanting to do cars with us. And I'm like, Dana, we just don't sell cars. You know, he says, I know, you got the unobtainiums, and that's what we got to have at the auction block. So we sat down and negotiated out a deal finally. And I learned a lot that day. I learned a lot about negotiating with Dana Meekum. And so he won some and I won some too. So we were both happy. So we go down to Kissimmee. We take 20 cars out of the museum. 2 of them we were never going to sell. Pam's pink Charger, a 70 446 pack Panther pink, which I only made 2 of. And I had a sunroof 71 Hemi Charger. Those were like put into the book so that you could, you know, teaser cars to get you to come look at the others. And so we sold 18 of the 20. 16 of the 18 out of our museum broke world records that night. And so there was a good time for us. And there was actually an NFL playoff game that day. I forget who was playing. And we, with NBCSN, had higher ratings than that NFL playoff game leading up to the Super Bowl that day because of all the fun we were having there. This shows how car people do get enthused over this stuff. So we have truly had a lot of fun. I remember we drove in the first car. Pam and I did. It's a copper colored Daytona Charger, the street version of this thing here. And Pam and I were leading in there, and we were like, what'd you say, Pam? This is kind of like the Super Bowl. Because there were just hundreds of people on each side of us, and we were driving in. They were clapping and saying good luck and all that. We pull up to the front. I get out of the car, and I do something a Southern gentleman should never do. Due to all of the excitement, I forgot to walk around the car and open her car door. And so I heard about that for a long time. So we've had a good run with Dana, and we're actually, we filmed 6 more cars this week. They're photographers over there. So if y'all watching Kissimmee in January, you're going to see 6 more of our cars go across. And about every 3 or 4 years we do that. And I got to tell you, once we started doing that, and I do a lot of commentating, there's a big Mopar collection coming out of North Georgia here with about 14 wing cars. I know him well. Pam and I have owned about half of those, so they want me to do all the TV time talking about Mopars. Now, for me to get up there and talk about a Boss 429 or a Ram Air 4, I'm lost. You know, it's just a pretty color when it comes by, even though I own one of each out here. But when it comes to Mopars, Ted, and I get it. So I guess I could say we've traveled a fun road with cars, and it's been fun, and it's still fun, and it always will be. True car people are a lot of fun to hang out with. You never know who you're going to meet in this business. And so that's kind of a quick view. I could tell you a whole lot of stories. We'd be here, I think Bruce said, well, you got about an hour, hour and a half. And I'm like, gosh, we need about 3 to even get started, don't we? So anyway, well, I'll let you go back and talk a little bit about survivors and stuff and get going.
Well, like Tim said, sometimes we're in competition for cars that become available out there.
I win most of the time.
I win most of the time. But like I said, this white Charger, I had a gentleman over in North Carolina that was supposed to be watching this car for me. For years this goes on. He says, I know where this car is, and you're going to want it. It's one of your cars. Yeah. Okay, he gives me a description of it. I said, I'm interested in the car. I said, if it ever becomes available, let me know. Don't worry, you're the man. You're in front. You got it. So Mark calls me one day, and he says, you know anything about a white 70 Hemi Charger over in North Carolina? Yeah. Well, looks like Tim's going to get it bought. So I called my guy up, and I said, I thought you were supposed to be on top of this. What happened to that? But it went to a good home, and it's all good.
Yep.
Yes, he does.
Actually,
I'll tell one on Miss Pam here. When Tim and I were young, we traded cars around some, and I had sold him a yellow 71 Super Bee. Remember one with the
I remember that car. Sure do.
And I'd gone to Atlanta first for something. I don't remember what it was, and the car was on a trailer behind the truck. And I was to deliver it to Tim that night, and I got late, and it was pouring down rain, and I ended up lost. And this is like 2 o'clock in the morning. And Tim says, look, just come on out to the house, park the truck, we'll do this in the morning, you stay here. So I said, okay. So we get out there, and I wake up in the morning, and the first thing I heard was Pam. There's a man in our room here. Who is this? That's where we met.
Yep. Well, back then, kid you not, life was not always great for us. We lived in a barn that had just a little small area on the end of it for living quarters because I used the rest of the barn for Pam and I to work on our Mopars. So we were more interested in room for the cars than we were room for ourselves. So he was in that little tight room with us when he woke up the next morning. A lot of fun stories.
We should have kept that car.
Yeah, that was a great one. And,
oh, well, can't keep them all. Tim mentions survivors. And as with any collecting fraternity, as that fraternity matures, the excellent examples of originals are the ones that are worth the money. We figured that out early, and it applies to cars, along with guns or whatever you collect. But survivor cars are something that are often faked, and you've got to be careful with them. We carry a paint gauge with us whenever we go to a show, and we use it religiously. It's also referred to as a lie detector. But a lot of these cars have had a lot of paint work done on them. They've had a lot of touch-ups done on them. We've seen a lot of fakery out there. So you got to be careful. And also, if you're looking for a car to restore, and we've been in the parts business forever, and this is probably something I shouldn't tell people because it costs part sales, but if you're looking to buy a car to restore, buy the most car you can on the front end. It will save you money in the long run because of all the things you don't have to buy and don't have to replace. And something else you do is if you don't know what you're looking at, you hire somebody that does and let them do the looking for you. Because if you buy something that's wrong or something that's been changed, what little bit that guy would have charged you would have been cheap compared to what it's going to cost you in the long run. So if you're out there shopping, be careful. There's a lot of junk out there. There's a lot of good stuff out there too, but it's getting hard to find.
Let me add something to that. If you're out there shopping like you're saying, and say you go to a Mecum auction, there's 3 rules, and I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with these 3 rules that I play by. If there's a car out there that I think I want to buy, if I know the history of that car, that's good. I might buy it. The second one is, if it's a car I think I might want to buy, and it's restored by a restorer, a well-known one that I know, I'd probably buy that one. The third one is a Survivor. Survivors, you know, we go around those, we paint gauge them, and we let the car talk to us. So we didn't even want to listen to the BS from the owner, which is telling you lies usually. So those are the only three examples that I would say if you ever go to an auction, beware, and if you apply those 3 principles, you'll be okay. But shiny paint will get you in trouble at an auction, and because when you get home, that's when you find out all the things you didn't want to know. And so, anyway,
We looked at a Hemi Cuda at an auction here a while back. One of our buddies was looking at the car, and this goes along with what Tim says about knowing the car and who's restored it. This car looked great. It gauged up pretty well, didn't have excessive paint on it. And our guy was thinking real hard about it. And I made a couple of phone calls, and we found out who restored that car, which was a good restoration guy. The problem was there wasn't much of the original car left. It was so rusty when they started on it that most everything on it had been replaced, including the cowl top that has the VIN number on it. So we didn't buy that car. It was a nice car, beautiful car, well done, very contemporary as far as the restoration techniques and keeping up with what is correct.
and well worth the, buying it and saving the car, but just not at what we want to do.
No.
Because we don't like cars that's had quarter panels and stuff put all over them. And but anyway, Survivors are where it's at. If you're looking at getting into the Mopar world, go buy a Survivor and you won't go wrong. The values continue to skyrocket on the things. The Copper Daytona that we sold for $1 million is going to be at Mecum in January, and we sold it 7 years ago. We doubled our money on it. The guy that's now selling it, because of the quality and the restorer, Roger Gibson, who's the premium restorer of any Mopar in the country, did it, and it's going to sell for $2 million, and that's in 7 years. So try to get your stock market to do that, $1 million in 7 years, and see. You might get lucky on a few things, but cars are pretty much. Let me tell you another thing about cars, and when times are looking kind of dismal in the stock market, people flood to these things because at least they see something tangible. Your money is not going away. Back about 7 or 8 months ago, Pam and I invested in two a 71 Hemi Charger and a 71 Hemi Challenger. Pulled the money out of the stock market and did it. I'm glad I did. I can still see where my money's sitting at, and the values of them are going up. So we really believe in these things. You just got to, like he said, you got to buy the best one you can buy and spend the money on it.
Yeah, in the long run, it's actually more cost effective. As the market continues to climb on these cars, we're seeing the separation, especially on Mopars, on numbers matching cars. Mm-hmm. This has become really, really paramount. We're talking huge differences between cars that don't have the original engines in them and cars that do. And this is not necessarily a slur against cars that don't have matching number engines. They can't all have that. And it's not the car's fault what all these people have done to it since it was new. But if you can afford, like I said, that's what you need to be looking at. Like I said, those are the cars that are going to pay you in the long run. And like I said, we have a lot of fun with these things. We enjoy them. We wouldn't buy them if we didn't want them. But they are investments. And like I said, it's something you got to be really careful with. We've seen guys sour because they bought cars that didn't pay, and they thought I shouldn't have bought this. It's the market's bad, the car's bad, the whole thing's bad. No, it's you made a bad choice.
Yep.
So you got to be careful.
Yeah, we saw an example of that just last year. I'll give you this one. 70 Hemi Cuda, a little small auction in Birmingham, Alabama. Well, the guy that's running the auction wants me to come look at it. And I go over to look at it. I recognize the car right off. I've seen it at several other auctions, and it's just a piece of junk. And it was told to be a 78-mile original Hemi Cuda. Now, that gets you excited if you just hear that for the first time. Boy, I'm going to buy a 78-mile car. That's got to be the best in the world. I went and looked at it. They might have been one fender on it. It was still original paint. That 78 miles came a quarter mile at a time. And I spotted all that. And I told him about it. And I said, he said, well, what do you think it's worth? I said, I'm going to say $150,000 because it still is a 70 Hemi Cuda, where a normal nice one would sell for $300. So I'm giving it half. That dang thing sold on the internet with somebody not seeing it for $550,000. And I'm going to tell you, when that car got to where it was going, somebody was not happy. And I'm not sure there would be a lawsuit over it if it was me. But that shows us kind of, some people just get kind of stupid with their money and they make irrational decisions. So back to Chrysler, what makes these cars fun? The Hemi engine, it's the only time in automotive history that you had a true NASCAR race engine in your car. And that's what the 426 Hemi is. They only made a few of them, 108 of these. My dad's 71 Hemi Charger that we still have, 63 of those. So it tells you there's small quantities. Why? They were the whole amount of around $700 to $800 extra. Don't sound like a lot, but today's world that'd be $7,000 or $8,000. But if you bought the car, that wasn't, the car's $5,500, but your insurance is going to be $2,500. Because the insurance companies have got on to, well, this is a race motor in a car. So you had to be well-heeled to buy one of these things, even in the day. And that's why they made so few of them. And so Bill France, owner of NASCAR, told they were racing. It started in '64, and along about 1970, he started complaining. He said, "These aren't stock engines, and we race stock cars. You're not selling them to the public." And so the Boss 429 and the 426 Hemi was about to be gone. But what did Ford and Dodge do? They said, okay, we got to sell them to the public. We're going to sell them to the public. And that was the only time that ever happened with a true bred NASCAR race engine in your street car. That's why there's so few of them. That's why they're so valuable today. And then they put it in this car. And this was the Grand National Champion in 1970. Bill France didn't like these special-bodied aero cars either, so he outlawed them as well, except for one thing. He says, you can still run the Daytona Charger, but you can't ever run the Hemi in it again. And so in 1971, one of these cars was fielded with a 305 cubic inch engine in it, and it dang near won the Daytona 500, and Pete Hamilton had to bump him. It would have won the Daytona 500. He outlawed the car because that's how good these cars were. They were so slick through the wind. So they got outlawed. Then Bobby Isaac and Harry Hyde. Let me tell you, there was a movie made about Harry Hyde, but you don't know it. Days of Thunder was about Harry Hyde. In fact, Robert Duvall's name was Harry Hogue. That's who built that car right there. So that's how famous this NASCAR crew chief was. There's a movie made about him. So then they outlawed it. So they went to the Bonneville Salt Flats, broke 28 land speed records, then got retired, and then was donated to the state of Alabama to International Motorsports Hall of Fame. And I was on the board of directors there I still am, for about 30-something years. And I made an offer to buy the car, and that's how it came about many, many years ago. But Mopars are really different. Imagine this car, and you could get it in 27 colors. You could get 6 vinyl top colors on the top. You could get 6 interior colors. In other words, if you went out on your order pad, it wasn't groups of stuff like you get today. You checked off each little thing you wanted. So your car was truly almost custom built for you, and you may never see another one exactly like yours. That's what makes these things a lot of fun. Chrysler did a lot of stuff with these things. I'll give you an example on this one. The shaker hood that's on it. Hemi Cudas are supposed to say Hemi Cuda. not 426 Hemi. Well, Chrysler being a company that didn't have the money that Ford and Chevy had, if they were running low on that shaker bubble, and you had a Challenger shaker bubble sitting there, and this car's coming down the assembly line because the Plymouth and Dodges went down the same assembly line, well, you just drop that on there. Now, if you go to a show somewhere, you'd get argued that it's supposed to say Hemi Cuda. This one here has never been off this car. Now we've seen other examples. So Chrysler used up whatever they had to use up to get the cars down the assembly line. So you could see some real oddities on these cars that you say, no, that's not supposed to happen. But it did. What's cool about the 71 Cuda, if you look at the grille, they changed it from the 70 to this real cool, what's called cheese grater grille. They went with these, this one has the painted bumper package, which makes it cool. All Hemis got shaker hoods. That was part of it. Then on the side of it, they took and put these gills in the side, kind of thinking like a Cuda, like a fish. And then the Hemi billboard, stripe it's called. And a lot of cars didn't get this. And you were telling a story today I didn't even know about. The engineers and the...
Yeah, the guys in final assembly sent a memo up to engineering that said, if you guys design any more stripes like this stuff here, you will come down here and put them on the cars. So, and they are very difficult to install. Mark will tell you, it's a big stripe. You got to work pretty fast. You better be using good material to make sure that it doesn't dry out too fast. And it's got a lot of different contours it has to follow. So, and if you'll notice after that, we didn't see any more stripes like this on cars from Chrysler.
Now, it was the largest stripe ever put on a car. And it could also said 340 cubic inch on the front for the 340s and 383 or 440 or the big King Kong engine called the Hemi. So that made them special. This car's got the rear window louver package, which is cool looking on them, I think. The rear wing, and again, your painted bumpers on the back of it. And like I was telling you, in the muscle car world, some people might argue otherwise, but this particular model car is the one that everybody wants to get a hold of, even if you're not a Mopar person. So, they were the pinnacle of it. 1971, the government shut it all down. No more Hemis. This was the end of the era, and the end of a great time in automotive history. But one of my favorites. This is actually my brother's car, Curtis, and like I said, we bought it back in the day down there in Jonesboro and painted it ourselves. And then I have one that's identical to this, except it has a white billboard on it, and a 4-speed where this is an automatic. But that's what makes you see a lot of pricing on Mopars, and they're going crazy, and this is a reason, because there's a lot of one-on-ones. And I do like the other muscle cars. If you come to the museum over in Alabama, you'll see one big horse car of every manufacturer built: LS6, Ram Air 4, Boss 429, W30, 442s. So you'll be able to walk the line, and you'll see everybody that was battling it out in 1970. So I hope someday y'all can all come over that way and enjoy that. We're about 2.5 hours from here, and you can do it and go over in a day and come back. And believe it or not, thanks to Meekum and all the time that I got to spend with them and on it, we have people come from all over the world. Now, we don't have, our numbers exploded whenever we got to getting on TV with Meekum for, people coming to see the cars. But one day we got to sit down and figure out, I think about every country in the world's been there now. And so anyway, we got some other questions. I mean, we're running some, if I can get this thing to work. Oh, you got control of it up there. There we go. This is Ted's car. You want to talk about it a little bit, and then we'll walk through a couple of cars and then take questions and answers.
We'll talk about the cars that we brought. This particular car was actually sold new in Atlanta. I bought it from, I had a 70 model 446 pack Super B, which I own again now. But the car belonged to a fellow that lived in Athens, Alabama. And this guy had another Super B that was sitting out on a car lot out on the highway, and I stopped to look at the Super B, and it had Hemi emblems on the front fenders. And I said, "Does this car got a Hemi in it?" And the guy said, "No, but the dude we got it from lives down the street here, and he's got a Charger's got one in it." So I go down there, and as a matter of fact, this fellow's name was Marty. Marty was out in the driveway washing it. And when I pulled up, and I got to looking at it, and I said, wow, this is really a great car. And I got to be pretty good friends with Marty. And when I bought this car, it had it was kind of tricked out. It had 456 gears in it and about a 3,500 stall converter, a set of hooker headers on it, and a tricked out ignition and all this kind of stuff. And I'd never ridden in a Hemi car before. And the way that thing made power, I was used to six packs and whatnot, but I'd never ridden anything that ran like that. Of course, that car wasn't stock. But it was, later on, Marty called me and he says, look, I got some financial issues and I need to sell this car. And I said, well, I don't think I can afford that car. And he said, well, what about your Super B? He said, would you be interested in trading it in on it? And I said, well, yeah. And I said, but I don't think that Super B is worth what that Charger is. And he said, how much money have you got in the bank? I said, let me look. And I said, I've got a little over $2,200. He said, bring me the Super B and the $2,200 and you can have the Charger. Okay. So that was many years ago. And I remember my mother-in-law was not real happy about me spending all of our life savings on that car. And we were at a family gathering, and she was complaining about it. And every family's got one guy that knows a little bit about everything in it. No matter what it is, you can talk to this guy, he's got the answer. And he's standing there, and he said, what kind of car did you buy? I said, a 68 Dodge Charger. And he said, what size engine does it have in it? I said, it's a Hemi. He said, it's a real Hemi car? And I said, yeah. And he looked at my mother-in-law, and he said, that car is worth twice what he paid for it. That was the last I heard about that.
Yeah.
But like some of the cars that Tim has, it was original paint when I bought it. And you know, back in the 80s, we thought the thing to do was paint them. So that car was restored once, and then it was re-restored in the late 2000s by a company up in Indiana called the Finer Details, who turned out some of the nicest over-restored cars in the country. And it has done really well. It won the Best of Show award at Musclecar and Corvette Nationals in Chicago, and it was the first car run through Musclecar and Corvette Nationals to score a perfect score. Tim and I could judge this car. I can tell you right now it wouldn't get a perfect score. But it was one of them situations where I think they were looking for somebody to do that with. There was a Corvette that year too, but I think they found a rock in the tread or something.
Change that up.
We've had a lot of fun with this car. Taking all that hot rod stuff off it, I felt like I castrated it. But
yeah, you cut the power way down.
It really cut it down, but it lives a pampered life now, so it doesn't have to have all that stuff.
Let's go to the get past this one. That's one we have in the museum there. It's a GSX, and I got to tell you, these things are badass. You think, I hate to admit it, that thing will outrun your Hemi. And for a Hemi guy to say that, that's tough. They made only 678 of these things. I think there was 498 of them in Apollo yellow, or Saturn yellow, wasn't it? Saturn yellow. And then Apollo white, they made 180 or 90 of them. So the white ones are actually more rare, but notice they use Apollo and Saturn. That was back in the days of us going to the moon and all that, and a lot of companies use that. This is 510 pounds of torque of just a menacing 455, and it was known in the day to be pretty much a Hemi killer. Now let me explain why. That 426 Hemi engine right there has two 4-barrels sitting on it. It has dual point ignition, and you had to keep all of that in perfect tune, and it took a real gearhead to do that. And then you had to adjust the valves on it. That thing there, you set it up once and it's done. It's just waiting on you anytime. So for most of us Hemi guys that were normal Hemi guys that couldn't keep all that in perfect, you didn't really want to mess with one of these. So, but when everything was right, they would. Same thing with the LS6. I don't know if that's the next, but yeah, this one right here. That's the one that I first met Dana Meekum with, or Pam and I did, and I'll tell you a little story on this. The original owner owned it until he died, and then it went through the auction, and I bought it. And then we have it for a bunch of years. And in 2015, we make the mistake of letting Dana talk us into run it back through the auction, and sure enough, we gave $110 for it. We paid $140 or got $145 for it. So okay, that's a good return. But I always missed a car because of that. Y'all probably watched Dennis Gage on TV before. He drove this car, and his hands down, he said, that's the best driving car I ever seen in my life. And General Motors were known for that. Our Mopars aren't necessarily that way. Now, we got a lot of performance, but they have a few rattles and shakes in them and stuff. So the family comes down every couple of years, the daughter and the son, and I swear they get weepy-eyed every time they see it, because that was Dad's car. They drive all the way to Wisconsin to come visit that car. That shows how some of these cars really mean so much to the family. And that's unrestored. That's what you want as a survivor. Especially you don't want to buy an LS6 unless one is a survivor or it's got all of the original paperwork. These things get cloned all the time, and you can't tell a real from a, so you've got to have the paperwork on them. And so this car here too will jump on your Hemi, but it'll jump on your Boss 429. Now, I think there's the Boss 429. It's in the museum. That also is a 7,800 mile survivor, and that's what we're talking about. When you see one that looks this good, like the black one or this one, that's what you want to go after, because those are the ones that's worth something. Now, the Boss 429, anybody know how it got the name Boss? You do? Well, Larry Shinoda designed this car, and inside of Ford, he was having to stay tight-lipped about all this program. And so Knudsen, or whatever his name, the head of Ford right then, they all called him the boss. Well, every time somebody would ask Shinoda about it, we're working on the boss's car. And so eventually it became the Boss 429. That's how it got its name. They made about 1,300 of these. They had to change up the engine is so massive. NASCAR required that you sold them to the public, but it didn't designate that it had to be in a Torino like it would have been racing in. So for whatever reason, Ford put them in the Mustang, and they had to change the shock towers because they couldn't get that motor in there. But it was also a performance killer. To get the Boss engine inside that Mustang, they had to use real restrictive exhaust, and they had to use a small carburetor because you couldn't breathe. So the power, when these come out of the dealership, they were kind of like dogs. But now, when you put headers on them and a bigger carburetor, it's a NASCAR monster then. But so what's the difference between a Boss 429 and a 426 Hemi and a 455 and a 454 that can jump on them, you know, pretty much daily and kick her butt? You can put the pedal down on that 426 Hemi or that Boss 429 for 500 miles wide open, and it will not blow up. You put the pedal down, I know you got some GM guys in here might disagree with this, on a 455 or a 454. Yeah, about 3 or 4 miles down the road, you'll have a big old oil spill. And that's the difference between a true NASCAR engine and a high-performance, you know, more or less street engine. So I always like to tell that, but GM guys don't like me so much when I do, but it's fact. So I don't know. All right, here's Ted again, real quick.
Okay, this car, this is a Mecum car. I know I'm supposed to be a Mopar guy, but my first ride in a fast car was in the back seat of one of those. And that dad that I mentioned a while ago is the only time I've ever seen him with a pair of horns growing out of his head. The car belonged to a good friend of his, and it was a test drive, and I think he forgot that I was in the back seat. But that was something that stuck with me. Mm-hmm. And later on in life, when I wrapped that first 68 Super Bee around a telephone pole, he said, what were you doing? I said, well, I was probably driving too fast. And he said, I don't understand where this comes from in you. I said, you remember the ride in the back seat of the 442? That's where it came from. So whose fault is it? But this is another thing that we say about buying cars. You got to do your homework. When the Mecum catalog came out, I think we bought this car in Kissimmee in 20, I believe. I looked at it, read the description on it, and I thought, if this car is what it appears to be, it's got 7,000 miles on it, this is one we need to think about. So we got down to the auction, and it's one of those cars, you walk around it twice and you know what it is. It's 100% original paint. It has its original tires, its original exhaust, all that stuff. So we did get it bought, and I called the man that owned it after the auction. And he was out, and his wife answered the phone, and she said, I said, I'm the gentleman that bought your Oldsmobile. And she said, let me tell you something about that car. She said, that car is the real deal. She said, everything about it is original. She said, my husband owned it for almost 40 years. He's had a lot of cars, and this is one of the ones that he kept. So when I finally did get this guy on the phone, he said, that car was always special to me. He said, I knew what the car was. And he said, I stored it in the wintertime. It was up on jack stands with rubber bands and baggies over the exhaust tips. And I put chrome on, or polish on all the chrome, and left it on there so it wouldn't pit. And it really is a spectacular survivor car. And the guy cried on me on the phone. I've had that happen before, but he said, I've just gotten to the point where I can't take care of it anymore. And he said, he said, the car deserves better than that. So he said, I'm going to pass it on. And he said, I hope you enjoy the car as much as I have. And we have, and I believe Mark pulled the wheels and tires off that car for the first time. So it's a really good original car. And but you've got to do your homework. And we went over the car with a paint gauge and all that good stuff. And while we were there at the show, one of the Oldsmobile experts comes in, and he looks the car over. He's got some guy there he's buying cars for, and we looked, and he did share some information with me that was most helpful. And the guy's actually become a good friend, but he made some wrong calls on it. General Motors cars, as Tim mentioned, you've got to have paperwork with them to prove what they are, because you can take a 4-door or a 2-door Cutlass and basically make that car, and unless you have something to prove it, the data tag and stuff on the top of the cowl is not going to tell you what the car is or was. And that was really important. There's a little bill card under the back seat of these cars. It's riveted to the seat frame with a hog ring. And on that little bill card, it will say W30 if it has the W30 option. And the W30s are the high-end 442s. I think the factory horsepower rating was 365 or 370, which, like a lot of other manufacturers' horsepower ratings, was a joke, but that was for insurance purposes. But the bill card was there, and they missed that. They thought the car had some paint work on it. It hadn't. They missed that. So you got to do your homework, and this goes back to purchasing cars. Again, if you don't know what you're doing, hire somebody who does.
That's for sure. And this is another one we have in the museum here. Some days you get lucky at an auction. This car here was in Auburn, Michigan, at a little offbeat worldwide car auctions. And I had a good friend up there, and I said, you know, I'm interested in a Ram Air 4 again. We had one, Pam and I, and it was a Ram Air 4 GTO Judge convertible that, believe it or not, we had just sold for $550,000. And so, but it was a convertible. Convertibles is another world. So I had a friend looking at this one, and I had told him I would go up to $125,000 on this car. Well, it wasn't a TV program for this little auction company, so I was watching the internet. Well, the bidding just don't go anywhere. And I'm like, sure. And I knew the car, there wasn't anything wrong with it. So I get on the phone. I said, bid now. This thing's fixing to fall to somebody for $40,000. And it went on up to $65,000. These things are easily $300,000 now. Why? Because it's the Ram Air 4. Ram Air 3 GTOs were the most common and with less horsepower. It'd be kind of like a 440 Charger to a 426 Hemi Charger compared in the Pontiac world. And so we won the thing, and I couldn't believe we bought it for that. Get it home, it's just everything it's supposed to be. This, again, it goes back to Apollo and Saturn. Well, this is called Orbit Orange, and it's unique because it's got a parchment top and a parchment interior. It's the only one that anyone knows that came out of the factory that color. These cars have a unique sound to them. Of all the cars in the museum that you start up at idle, this don't even compare to that. That has got the meanest sounding idle you'll ever hear. In fact, they had a package on them you could order back in the day called a rumbler package, and they disallowed it because it was so noisy. You had a switch in your car, and you could switch it to even louder than that. But so it was a fun time. And then you got the Judge package. So it's not just a Ram Air 4. It could be a Ram Air 4 GTO without the Judge package. But when you add the Judge package and you add a 4-speed, then you start getting to the top of the heap there. Well, that's kind of the cars that's out there. I think that was all of mine and yours. There was a couple more. Any questions y'all want to pose right quick? We don't want to keep you too late, but we're happy. We'll talk cars as long as you want to talk cars.
Okay, so we have 2 microphones. So if you would allow us to give you the microphone and ask the question in the microphone, because we're also recording this, and so if you ask the question without the microphone, we can't actually hear whatever the question is. So if you just raise your hand, we got one up at the top and one at the bottom. So thanks.
Thanks for being here, first off. But can you define the difference between a survivor car and a numbers matching car?
Go ahead, Ted.
Well, a survivor car is just that. It's a survivor. It has survived, which they all have survived, but they've survived as they were originally manufactured, original paint. And they're very, like Tim said, there's varying degrees of survivor cars. Some of them are cars that have some originality to them. Some of them have all of the originality to them. And some of them have most of the originality to them. And there's different judging venues. There's one in the Mopar world called Mopar Survivors. It was started by a gentleman out of Pennsylvania named Mel Major, who we lost just a few months ago. But Mel's sons are continuing that deal there. With Mel's setup, in order for the car to be accepted, it had to be at least 60% original paint. Most of these cars have been in little parking lot skirmishes and stuff like that, and they're going to have had some paint work done on them somewhere. Some of them had a lot of paint work done on them for some reason or another. But the more original the car is, the better it's going to score in that type of judging. And it's based on condition and originality. Probably the most stringent judging venue for that is, what does Frank call that thing they do up at McCacken?
Time capsule.
Time capsule. Matter of fact, Tim's got a car that's going to compete in time capsule here in a few weeks. The time capsule judging is basically where you get a bunch of car Nazis together, and they scrutinize that thing from bumper bolt to bumper bolt. They try to find everything that's been changed on it. It's been judged accordingly, and then rewarded accordingly. But survivor cars are something that it's like I said, as you get older, they say when you're collecting cars, you either collect survivors or you collect street rods before it's over. Mm-hmm. But you can restore a car 1,000 times over, and they usually get better every time you do it. But they're only original once. And like I said, in order to keep it that way, to find it that way, and then keep it that way, is a venture of its own. So a matching numbers car is going to be a car that has its original drivetrain components, like the original engine block. And with, I don't know about GM cars, older GM cars, but this car, the original or the VIN number is stamped on the engine block. It's stamped on the transmission. So you can look at it and see, whether the car has the original drivetrain components in it. But you don't want to go over the car and make sure if it's supposedly all matching numbers, it's going to be original block, original transmission, correct radiator, correct carburetor, and whatever else had part numbers on it from the factory.
But I would deem a true survivor will always have matching numbers in it. Yeah, that's how I look at a true survivor.
Well, there's one Ram Air 4 judge going through Mecum in Kissimmee that's a survivor. There's several of them going through there. There's one survivor. Of course, that's the first thing we look at.
Yep.
and you read the description of it and the car's got a replacement block. That's not acceptable to us. But there's going to be somebody else out there that may not be so important to them. You know, it is the original paint on the car, and I'm sure there's paperwork with it and whatnot. And these high-end cars like this led rough lives. Usually they weren't usually bought to drive to church Sunday, and people ran a stew out of them. So some of the cars are more likely to grenade than others are. These things here are pretty good, but they have a tendency to spin bearings and stuff like that. And the rear end gears they put in them, what's that car got in, a 410?
Yeah, super track pack. 410
cars, known engine killers. Like I said, the engine's spinning and the beer's flowing and, you know, it goes downhill from there. But these cars are a real survivor car is something that as time goes by, they will increase in value. And this is proven in what we've seen over the last few years. The market is cyclical, like anything else. Whether I don't care what kind of what you're fooling with, but when the market starts down or evens out or plateaus, the survivor cars are the last thing that stops as far as increasing in value. When the market starts to return, they're the first things that start going up as it starts. So you can gauge the market with these cars. And that's because the high-end collectors that's what we're looking for now. And like I said, they're few and far between. So don't necessarily discount a survivor car because it doesn't have 100% of its original paint. You'll probably never find one. But also, you don't want to buy something that the original motor's not in it unless it's like this GTO we were talking about. The Ram Air 4's top of the food chain was one of those things. Mm-hmm. And if you want to own a Ram Air 4 GTO and you want a survivor, there's not that many to pick from out there. So you may have to accept something that the block's been changed or something like that.
Yeah, the Ram Air 4 engine was something that didn't live a long time. There's certain things about that motor allowed it to kind of waste itself if you did a lot of high performance with it. And it had some faults inside. But last thing on the survivor car, you're going to pay more for a survivor car, but you're also going to get a lot more for it when you sell it because they just continue to go up. And they may bounce a little bit, but they're the first right back up. So anyway.
There's a difference in the way these cars drive too. You can restore a car with the best parts you can buy today, you know, suspension parts, whatever. And you think, well, this thing should drive like a new one. You can't make these cars feel like this again. Yeah. You sit down in one of these survivor cars that's got low miles on it, it's 1970 all over again.
And they drive good. They do. All right, another question?
Yep.
I see
We've got one up here.
Up top, up there.
Yeah, you'd commented that the owner of that car couldn't maintain it anymore. I imagine there's more to it than just parking it. What all is involved in maintaining a car?
Well, the main thing that these cars have fluids in them. That's the main thing that's going to give you problems. If you're going to store one of these cars long term, you really need to drain all the fluids out of it, especially the gas. Tim runs a combination of racing gas and aviation fuel in his cars, and we run basically straight racing gas in ours. And racing gas will not turn into gum like the stuff you buy out of the pump. It will basically just dissolve. It just goes away. It leaves kind of a light powdery residue on the interior parts of that flows through. But keeping them up they really need to be driven too. It's putting a car into a museum is a wonderful thing. It preserves it, but and at the Wellborn Museum, these guys drive all their stuff. They get it out and they exercise it. That's a good thing. But and that you'll have a lot less problems with them like that. But the gentleman that owned the 442, I think, was in his 70s, and he was having some health issues as well. And that was one of the reasons why he said he couldn't take care of the car anymore. But like I said, nothing changes, but you need to keep it current you need to stay on top of it, make sure that, you know, it's easy to put a car away and first thing you know, 2 or 3 years has gone by and you forgot about it and the gas turned to varnish and ruined everything in the fuel system. You know, we've changed a bunch of them like that. You know, we buy cars sometimes been sitting up that we haven't heard run, and then we find out it won't. And you have to, if you get something that's bad enough, we bought a GTO last year. How long that car been sitting, Mark? 35 years. Well, they did get it started running off of a jug, but we know the gas tank's going to be done. Most likely the fuel lines, the fuel pump works right now, but we don't know for how long that'll go on. But and it's difficult to find somebody that you can trust to work on these things. You can't just take it down to the local service station and say, here, change the oil in this or the quickie lube or whatever, because you don't know what they're going to do. They don't know what the car is, don't appreciate it. But there are companies now that are starting to pay attention to these cars that basically specialize in them. Finer Details is one of them. They'll do any kind of work on one of these cars. If you want the carburetor rebuilt in it, or if you want it serviced or whatever, they'll do it. But
another thing too, if you buy one of these are not roller cam cars. You have to use AMSOIL or oils that have the right stuff in them, or you will waste your cam right off the bat on them.
A high content of zinc. Valvoline VR1, there are 2 different types of that. One of them is a pure racing oil, I think, and the other is basically designed for stuff like this. It's got enough zinc in it to keep the valves and the cam lobes and lifters and stuff lubricated.
With even 100 miles with the wrong oil in it, the oil that you go buy today, you've burnt your cam. So that's just some of the little things you know about these things. And another thing too I mentioned, and we'll see if there's any more questions, is insurance on these cars. I know probably y'all are in the automotive world and you know about Haggerty. That's who I insure with all of my cars. And you think it's expensive. Really, it's not that bad. I was asked earlier today, this car right here is probably about $800 a year to insure it for $1 million. They know these cars don't get driven much. Their liability is low on them, so insurance is something you should have on your car for sure, but it's just not that expensive compared to possibly a fire or tornado, or like some of you probably saw the Superbird in Daytona that Hurricane Ivan turned upside down there in Florida, and you'd never know when something's going to happen to them. But it's, you know, insurance is not a big deal on these things, so I just want to throw that out. Yep.
One question. Do you have any comment that you can offer about gasoline, aviation fuel? You mentioned briefly earlier. I know they've changed the formulation of aviation fuel.
We're still running, we at the local airport there, we go still get their 100 low lead, which gives you a little bit of lead, and then we run 110 with it. And I don't want to say aviation fuel's got a preservative in it, but it's just made so much cleaner that it doesn't go bad, and that's why we mix it half and half. But I'm not aware right now of the particular, you know, how much it may have changed. Or you may know more than I know about that.
Well, I recently read where aviation fuel, they've deleted the lead in it completely.
Have they? I hadn't seen that at our local airport, but yeah.
And I was not aware of it until I read that.
Well, I'm gonna check on that for sure, and because we need a little lead in them if I have to start adding it with a bottle. Okay.
Hi there, I have a question. I appreciate the wisdom that you've shared about investing. I am wondering, and I have to say, don't get confused because I'm wearing blue tonight.
I know you're probably going.
I'm wondering about what you think about the future of gasoline collectible cars if we have a government that is pushing electric.
Well, I'm pretty sure you're probably going to always have fuel. It just may be expensive. I don't think you could, in our lifetimes, I don't see it going away. And it may 40 years, 50 years from now when most of us are gone, but I just don't think it's going to be that bigger issue. Well, I certainly hope not. Time will tell on that. I've had some people come through the museum in recent months that, you know, they're buying Demons and Hellcats and they're putting them up and they think that 30, 40 years from now they'll be what these are. Maybe they will. But kind of to your point, will they be running? Because already older Dodge pickups and a lot of cars you can't get computers for anymore. So who's to say 40 years from now when it starts becoming this age right here, which is 50 something now on this one, or is anybody going to be servicing them computers? So I don't know that I would buy a new Demon or Hellcat and put it on ice and thinking 40 years from now I'm going to be selling it for what one of these is worth, because you may not have it. And you may not have that gas either. We don't know.
There's another theory on that. Gas prices are determined by consumption. The more we use, in theory, the cheaper it should be. So if all these electric cars come on and the fuel demand drops to the point where there's another price war going the other way, it may get cheaper. That's possible. But most likely is they're going to be formulating gas to run in what you're buying now. They're not ever going to worry about these things. So hopefully we'll be able to get racing gas and aviation fuel and stuff like that in the future. And something I heard about aviation fuel, the FAA regulates that stuff. They don't allow it to go bad. If you put some of that stuff in an airplane and you have problems with it at 15 or 20,000 feet, you got big problems. So the FAA makes sure that that stuff is not allowed to go bad. Now what happens to it after you buy it? I don't know how long it'll last. But when you buy it out of the pump, it's something that they've approved, and it should give you, you know, some time before it becomes a problem.
We got one more? Are we okay?
Yes, my concern is that I've been doing this a long time, probably about the same age you guys are, is the future of collectability, because the 20-year-olds don't care anything about cars. They don't even want to own a house.
True.
And my concern is, you know, how much longer is this going to last as far as the collectability of the $1 million car, because I've got some high-end cars too. And, you know, it's like, when do I sell them? I'm in my early 60s now. Like, when do I start getting rid of everything? 10 years. A lot of my friends that are in this, they say, Ken, you got about 10 years left. You know, I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to hold you anything, but nobody knows the future. But politics play into this too. But we just don't know how long it's going to last as far as cars bringing this kind of money, because, like I said, the 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, they just don't care anything about it.
Well, I'll make this comment about that. I get asked that question a lot. And you might say that, okay, we're a half century into these. These 52 years ago when that thing was built. And how long is it going to stay at that high level? I would say that it might only be 10 years except for one thing. Because, you know, you and I, we're going to be in our 70s, and you're probably going to you're not going to care like you used to care about this. But due to the last, I'm going to say 8 to 10 years, you had the new muscle car war all over again. Camaros, Mustangs, Hellcat Chargers, Challengers, and even the Challenger is a big throwback to the look of the original. So my feeling is this: those 30, 40-year-olds that bought those cars, their kids are going to get out of school, get out of college. They probably got their own businesses, some of them, and got a good, decent job. You know what? I want to buy a 1970 Hemi Challenger like my dad used to have. So I think that we've extended these cars because of what's happened recently, even though they're modern cars, but you've revived all those names. They're all muscle cars in their right today. And as those people mature out, which are good 20, 30 years behind us, I do think that they'll start looking at some of these and may cause, and they'll live on even longer. And even at that point, say you can't run them anymore, well, there's a lot of these cars in this museum we're still looking at that they don't run, or you can't get the parts to keep them running. So maybe you just look at them from that point on. But I still think we've got, if I had to throw a number at it, we got 20 years. And but who knows, really? That's just my thoughts on it.
Oh, okay, so thanks everybody.
All right.
So if you want, you can kind of come on down here if you maybe want to get your picture with the car or talk real quick. But I think the museum's open till 9. Yep. So appreciate everybody showing up. coming here, and let's give Ted and Tim a hand.
All right, thanks.
And hope to see you guys back here next month at the next lecture. Thanks.